There's a small shed in my backyard. This is what it looked like before we moved in. A standard gardening shed.
So I'm picturing a small shop in here.
So far I've done a bunch of work to really transform it. And most recently, I started putting up the drywall on the bottom. And then I installed a hardwood floor, which turned out just beautiful. So that's where I left off. And now I'm ready to continue. Okay, got temporary child-proof porch railing on here. But let's go inside. That's right, I'm thinking about what order to put the rest of the drywall up in.
I think in some ways I'm going to do the gable ends first, because that way I'll be able to do the ceiling and butt that up correctly after that. So gable ends, ceiling, and then the remaining of the walls. Maybe a little bit unorthodox in the order.
So since I started this makeover, if you will, every step I take, I think, wow, this is really what makes this a real building, that takes it away from shed territory. Before this, it was adding the windows and the door, and then the siding, and then the flooring. However, I really think that once the drywall goes up, it adds such a clean and bright feeling. The whole place feels bigger. And, it is pretty small to begin with, so the illusion of size is kind of nice. Now, I've had quite a few people ask, why am I using drywall for a shop? Why not plywood on the walls so I could screw in anywhere, or even wood, like tongue and groove? And while drywall can be a little bit annoying to work with, I think, it's also by far the cheapest option. I mean, plywood is pretty expensive, plus I don't need to be able to screw in everywhere. I'm planning on building storage solutions for different places, which will be fine. And real wood, I think that would be nice, especially if you maybe whitewashed it a bit so it's not too woodsy. But I figured if I want to add a section later down the road somewhere, I could always do that. And yeah, screwing them up in the ceiling here. And this is where it started getting just a little challenging, I would say. I mean, drywall sheets are big and heavy, and you certainly could rent a lift or have helpers around, in which case you would have less seams. Well, I decided to go completely the different direction and cut the drywall up even smaller when it came to the sides of the ceiling, so that I could lift them myself. Of course, the other thing to think about here was cutting sections out of a sheet of drywall that would be able to go in between the studs here, which meant I needed certain sizes. So out of like one sheet, I didn't get that many pieces for the ceiling because they were actually rather long, so I had to cut them on the long side. So I ended up with a lot of offcuts here, but I figured that would be perfect for the walls, so no problem. And here I'm marking out where the studs were, and I think that was definitely the most challenging in the ceiling, like realizing where the studs were exactly. That's not a problem when you're doing the walls, but when you're trying to hold the drywall in position with one hand and then get the screw into the stud with the other, it was easy to get it slightly off position every now and then. But it was nice because I had the ledge there to rest the drywall on, which made it a lot easier than if I would have to hold it in place completely by myself.
So done with one half of the ceiling, which I'm happy about. It's very tiring, holding the drill up like that. I just cut it up into smaller pieces so that I was able to do it by myself. I don't care so much if I have to do a little extra mudding and taping. Someone else would have done this drywalling in like one day. I'm taking like a week to do it. But that's okay.
And yeah, I must say, I was very happy that I could use my head as a third arm to hold it in place. It's very useful.
I got the ceiling completed, and now just the wall parts, but I feel like that's gonna be like a breeze in comparison. Definitely realizing that I'm gonna be an expert at mudding and taping after this because there are so many lines. Which is fine, I don't care. The question is, what looks best here? Shadow line or all the way up? I think the shadow line looks better, but I also think that might be more difficult to cut straight and make it look good. But I could always add like some molding or some trim on top of it, maybe? I should probably go all the way to the top. Make it easy for myself. Okay, final spurt here. Gonna get the rest of the drywall up and then move on to the mudding and the taping. Okay, success. And with this, I'm now done putting up this on the wall. Finally.
So in between working on the drywall, I figured it would be nice to take a break and clean up the area outside a little, where I want to have a large picnic table that I can work on as well. And as I finished, I figured I should probably clean up the garden tools and protect them against rust now that the weather is turning, do a little winterizing. Now, I partnered with WD-40 on this video, and they have so many great products. And for this use, I picked the Specialist Long-Term Corrosion Inhibitor. It says on the can that it protects metal for 1 year. So the rake, the shovel, which turned out so nice, I started thinking about what else could use a little rust protection. Well, the cast iron parts on the lawnmower, certainly. And then our fire pit. And the cover for sure. Then I was like, I have a new red metal toolbox for the shop. And these boxes always get rusty, so I want to protect that one. And then I looked around more and other things popped up that needed protecting. The connection points on the propane tank. Not to mention the piping connecting the generator here. So nice to do a little winterizing and protect everything against rust. And I want to thank WD-40 for supporting this channel. But now let's get back inside and continue working.
So I went shopping, got my mudding and taping supplies, and now I'm going to get started. I think what I'm going to do first is do the mesh tape wherever I have bigger holes. Go from there. Pretty good, I would say.
So I did have a couple of joints where the gaps were, not tiny. And first I was thinking that maybe I would need to plug those holes in with some wood or something. But using the mesh tape and the mudding compound seemed to work really well. And then the idea would be that I would add the mudding and the taping on top of that once it's dried. And at this point I was thinking in terms of like my schedule and time here that perhaps one day for the initial taping and mudding, then another day for the second coat, and a third day for sanding and touch-ups. That was my plan.
Okay, so yesterday did the first day of mudding and taping. Everything is looking really good.
So the order I'm doing this in, standard mudding and taping order. First mud on a seam, then tape, then scrape the mud off, then add a second layer of mud on top of the tape, and then scrape that off. If possible, you want to avoid bubbles and having the tape drying without any mud on it. And this is for the first day, to connect the edges of the drywall together and hopefully make them disappear once you've added a second or even a third coat and sanded and painted. And yes, there are quite a few more steps to do, but I'm sure it will be nice once it's all done.
In the beginning, when I first started, I was like super careful. I didn't want any inconsistencies, any bumps anywhere. And after a while, you know, you start to get a little bit less careful because I want to get it done. So I am finally done with the first taping and mudding in the entire room. And I knew it was going to take a long time, but it definitely took a while. I mean, I haven't been able to devote that much time each day, like a couple of hours, but it still took me like 4 days. So I'm finally at the point to start the second coat of the mud. And in some ways I feel like this is where you can kind of play a little bit, because the whole goal is to make it really smooth and hopefully not have to sand too much. This is very easy to get stuck doing this. Like, you can work on one area for the longest time and it's still not perfect. And it gets you kind of frustrated, and then you realize that if you kept doing the one, you'll never move along. Very tricky with the seams, you see the edges of it. I was just getting more mud and I realized that I'm almost out. I feel like this room is probably the equivalent of like 2 or 3 regular rooms because of the amount of seams that I have here. It's like I'm getting the hang of it a little bit better. I think it's all about the angle of the knife when you put it out to make sure you don't get as many streaking lines. But it's kind of hard to get good, I think. Okay, so I got most of the second coat on around here, so it's looking really good, even though I do find this to be rather frustrating, very difficult work. I was just thinking, if I ever have like a bigger room to do, I'm gonna hire someone to do this. So thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions about anything in the comments below. I'll see you guys soon. Bye. Nice and smooth, huh? Yeah?